Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Operation Warp Drive. Kick it off, Chief.
Hey, sir. Good to see everybody on here today. Happy midday, all you true believers out there in Texas and beyond who are tuning in today. Hopefully for a repeat performance. You may not have been here for all nine of these, but we are at session nine, sir. It's hard to believe here in May, and so welcome again to everybody on here from home from Camp Mabry, Texas. In Austin, home of Keeping It Weird. But of course, the real important piece of this is it's home of the Texas Military Department, sir, as everybody knows. So
Yeah.
um, anxious to get this started. Colonel Hildebrand, I don't think you need at this point any more introductions. I'll let you introduce our special guest, but it's good to see you. I know you've got quite a few irons in the fire with everything that's going on, but we appreciate you taking the time to set this up and get this started.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chief. Good intro. Hey, everyone. We got a special guest with us today, John Spencer. He is an award-winning scholar, professor, author, combat veteran, national security and military analyst. You've probably seen him on maybe Fox News or some of these other channels. He's internationally recognized expert and advisor of urban warfare. He's got 25 years of service under his belt. He advises many important people, including top four-star generals and other senior leaders in the U.S. Army, and he works with some elements of the United States Military Academy. So, John, thank you for being with us today, my friend.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a big honor, and if any chance I can get to talk to warfighters and talk to our community, it's better than some of the other things I do.
Yeah, well, awesome. I mean, and you do have a lot of stuff on your plate. Thank you for taking the time. I know how busy you are. I mean, I see how much you put out there. I follow you on X and see you on some of the other social media platforms. And so truly, we appreciate you taking time to kind of share your experiences. And that's what this Operation Warp Drive is about. So we have within our division, we have a writing program. It's one of the things that the Chief of Staff, the Army, is getting after. And our commanding general, Major General Brad Bowen, has asked us to start up a writing program for the division. And so, we're trying to get these aspiring writers to get up there and get out and put something out there on the net. Maybe write something for a journal, maybe do an AAR. And so, we've had some guests on in the past that share their experiences, and we're kind of hoping to hear some of the experiences that you have writing, especially in the different forums that you have writing. So we also have a special fan of yours. I don't, it's his name is Sam Ellison. So he's been a long time follower of you. I don't know if you've seen him tracking some of your stuff, but he's a big fan. Sam, what do you say, buddy?
Hey, sir. Again, thanks for having me on. Sir, I'm the C5ISR planner for the Multi-Domain Activities Division here in the Texas Army National Guard, which is a new organization within the Texas Military Department. And our focus is on adapting the force to the new doctrine with a real focus on operating in the electromagnetic spectrum, but also in building the community of folks that are change agents and looking to improve the organization as we face changes in doctrine and changes to the operational environment. I really rely on podcasts like yours and other folks at MWI and War on the Rocks to really inform us in how we drive the organization. So look forward to the conversation and look forward to any mentorship from you to the force about how we make our organization better through intellectual pursuit.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. So John, how do you I seen your day, man. So how do you structure? How do you find the time for writing? What is? I mean, I seen you stood up the Urban Warfare Center, but you also talk about subterranean operations. So you got a lot of different passions. So how do you prioritize your passions, and how do you kind of put the pen on paper?
Yeah, it's a great question that I've been dealing with from when I found. So my one of my biggest regrets from my military career was just only finding writing at the end. Really, it was the last few years of my military career while teaching at West Point that I just by happenstance happened to meet somebody who said, "You got a lot of things to say. Let me help you on putting some of that on paper in different formats." How I structure my day to now, because of so many wars going on so much. Of course, I prioritize my family first, but I have a couple podcasts that I listen to just to stay up to date. And then I'll make a decision on whether there's a topic where I think I can weigh in on. I've evolved, of course, but I always struggle with this ideal that when I was started writing, other professional, other colleagues would say, I wish I had the time to do that. We all have the time. It's just like you said, a priority of whether it's I I even do if I do a run on the weekends, although I'm retired now, so I don't do as much. I'll use the note function in my phone, and I'll stop running because I can. If something hits me, and I can I'll form an article, or if it's a longer piece, sometimes things have to fall into place. We wrote a really good book, which I highly recommend for your program. And I know you mentioned the CSA's Harding Project, which, the emphasis about writing actually served at West Point with one of the main leads of that project. And MWI was helping getting the word out there. But we wrote this book called Why We Write. It's a bunch of different authors, military authors, saying, why do I write? And I explained how I found writing and then why I write. Now I do so much different types, like you said, where, right, if you want to take writing an op-ed for military times, Army times, something like that, that's a very unique type of writing. Each one has their own style, what that outlet wants. And two, I published in every newspaper in the United States because I just wanted to at one point. So I targeted them all from New York Times on. Those have a specific, but if you're going to write a book, of course, that's a whole different animal. But that thing always came back to me is I wish I had the time. It can take a matter of 30 minutes a day sometimes when I'm forming something that I'll just put a block together in a piece. And I have lots of Word documents or like articles or ideals I have. And writing actually puts your ideals to the test too, right? Do you have an interesting idea, or do you have an actual argument, position, or something you want to experience that you want to think that other people would learn from, which is a real kind of part of our profession that is inherent in our profession, is to share knowledge across the force. And often also that people think that, well, I'm just a low part of this overall machine, when the history of innovations to, like he said, change agents from, integrating the tank, the airplane, all these things came from, low level, either officers or enlisted, writing or communicating about that, which is so important. So I write about 30 minutes a day, unless I'm working on a project where it requires more, but it ebbs and flows.
Excellent. Yeah. Hey, and I'm going to pull the thread on some of these, but before I do, I just want to make sure I'm not monopolizing your time. We have the whole writing roundtable here. So I'm sorry, team. I forgot to introduce or failed to introduce the team to John. So now you got Jared Kraus. He's our research and development guy. So he focuses on AI. So he's trained some Chat GPT to do some mean things, John. It's insane. And then we have our counselor, Mariah Gagnon. So she keeps us straight, make sure we follow the rules, but she also asks some very pointed questions. TJ Clifton's my XO at the DeVarty. You've met Sam, and then you heard Chief Lightsey introduce us. Chief's the conductor for the 36th Infantry Band. So team, anyone want to pop off and pull a thread for John? Do it, buddy.
I've got one, sir. Hey, Mr. Spencer, do you find that you have to allocate? You talked about your craziness, your schedule. I know that when I try to do, there's something I try to do every day, like score study, even if it's 15 minutes, that I have to sort of allocate that same time every day, whether it's a little bit early, finding that niche to do your 30-minute, which sounds like it's more of a self-development, channeling writing that's part of the passion instead of part of the work.
Originally, it was the passion, but I also helped create. I was a co-founder of the Modern War Institute, where we wanted to get things out in print and become a voice. So then it became work, right? So the passion, which is always the best case scenario when your passion is your work, within a reason. Now it's similar. Now my role is to produce content, podcasts, articles, research reports, things like that. That first 30 minutes of my day is that professional development of I've curated my social media, whether it's my X or the podcast I subscribe to where I can quickly within that 30 minutes listen to something, if it's conflict specific or professional development within that 30 minutes before I wake up my kids. I can consume information which kind of guides me throughout the day. And then I have kind of work time where I'm focused on if I have a project or writing that I'm dedicating more time. But that daily professional development, and at the end of the day as well, I've always done this where after I put the kids to bed, part of my rhythm is that I'm back on segregating a dedicated amount of time, especially for the writing at that point. So it's like consume the daily information, whether it's early bird or whatever in the morning. And then those put the ideas in your mind. If I'm not writing about something, what's the next project? And I do a lot of rapid response articles as well as my research into wars. So some of my recent articles about like the India-Pakistan war, consume the information. This is there's a really famous article I highly recommend as well by Admiral Stavridis, which is read, research, write, and publish, something like that. I mean, he was one of the most prolific officers we've had in a generation on the amount he published. And with his crazy schedule, it goes back to, I just wish I had the time. I mean, come on, if a 4-star general has the time to do it, it's about how you prioritize things. Of course, we prioritize physical fitness, and we should be prioritizing writing as well.
Yeah.
Well, we often discuss the training schedule, right? Soldiers keep asking about this and that. You say, look at the training schedule, and that'll tell you the priority, right? Or look at the flow of money and all that. So, no, I appreciate your time, sir, and your answer.
Yeah. Don't tell me where you spend your time is where you tell me what matters to you.
Right. Hey, John, I find it interesting that you bookend your day with professional development. You talked about doing it in the morning. And a lot of us on this writing roundtable have children, and so I have found that the earlier I get up, the more time I have for myself, because no one else wants to get up early except Dad. So kudos, and absolutely, it makes sense. Here's something interesting, and this is something I struggle with sometimes, especially as I'm getting older. Is it's my best time for thinking is in the morning. That's where I do my most creative work. But it's also when I feel the most compelled and most motivated to work out. And so like for me, it's like a balance. It's like you said, hey, where do you spend your time? Well, oftentimes I have to dissect my day and say, well, I'm going to work out in the morning, or I'm going to do some creative working in the morning. And then one has to give to the other. So as you look at your day, you mentioned you spent research. You said you had some time to research. Where do you fit research into this? Because professional development, you're doing some work. I mean, obviously in your profession, research is work for you in some cases. But also, I know that you structure interviews with people that you're interviewing for your articles, which I mean, interviews are research too, but it's a different kind of research, more time intensive probably. So how do you kind of fit in where you get into that virtual library, or you're hitting the different websites to go deep dive into something you want to really look for?
Yeah, it's so if you were to assign me somebody to do that workflow analysis, it would probably be a little bit chaotic. Once I drop the kids off, then I have about 9 to 2 dedicated for actual both research, and we all have the email, the tyranny of the email and things like that. So it depends on the day. I also have the goal of a monthly podcast, a monthly publication, no matter what it is. So I have those as kind of overarching, whether those are actually just personal goals, not even written into my work contract. That's a goal. So if I haven't done that, then that becomes a priority. Each one of the different research lanes, if I do a lot of field research. I just got back from Azerbaijan and just got back from Israel in March, and those produced a lot of content that I need to then determine what to research. And we just published a case study on the Battle of Hadrut, which is one of the battles during the 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh war, which is really important, that required dedicated hours to say, okay, this is a high priority. Having co-authors really help with that, because they'll like, look, you have this whole professional accountability. If you have a co-author, then if it's because co-authoring can also be burdensome, but if you have the right co-author, it can be very helpful to set a deadline and kind of help you put priorities. One thing you said, though, that keyed me about the best time to think. I have random times when ideas come to me, and every great writer I've ever known, like mentors of mine, have some small notebook or some capability to, when an ideal hits you, because sometimes it hits me in the shower. I don't really run. I do kind of a jog thing now, a jog. I have a way to write that down immediately. And that's a part of the thinking that happens even in the subconscious. You never know when it's going to hit you. So every writer I've ever known and researcher has some type of, we always talk about having pen and paper, but really, honestly, even in our civilian times, have something, and it can be your phone's note capability. That is, I actually never know when that right moment of thinking is going to hit me outside of those dedicated hours, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know, Jared, you do a lot of running and thinking.
Yeah, I do. Right. You talk about co-authors. I think Colonel Hudderbrand's kind of like mine, and he always pushes me to deadlines. But right when we get on a new topic, we have to come up with a creative way of doing stuff. It might be 2 PM. I'm gonna go, and right, South Texas, 105 degrees. I'm gonna go run. I might make it a mile. I might make it 4. Depends on how much I need to think. And then, like, I don't record when I'm running. When I get back, I go right, which, the team turned me onto this, where doing the voice transcribes and the notes on the phone. I
Yeah.
take it that way. It's kind of all over the place. And I'll feed it into, some AI. Hey, clean this up. Give me this. Okay. Yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for. Hey, let's expand more on this. Find me some articles related to this. That really starts refining my research process. So I don't spend hours online reading something that was like, why did I just read that? I wasted my time.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like where I build that AI into the workflow, that kind of just exactly what you're talking about. Where do we find this time from? Right. It's finding these effective ways that work for us. It's not for everybody.
Yeah.
I think the last 2 weeks, the work we've been working on, everything was manual work. It was only critical thinking. No AI could accomplish what the stuff that we've been working on. And so it's that balance of that, right? Of not letting this AI do everything, but helping me be very efficient in it. Right. It goes back to what you're saying. And then you give that time to get that professional writing done out of the way, get the thoughts on paper, then start sharing them.
Yeah, structure really matters. So that's one of my challenges with writing, is that I have ideals, and I have articles or pieces, but that's that for me. And what I've learned, of course, the more you do it, the easier it gets, right? And how do you write something? You don't just sit down and go, okay, I'm going to write a paper today. I'm going to write a book today. You do it bit by bit, paragraph by paragraph. And sometimes it is in those non-scheduled times that something falls into place for me. And I agree with you. The AI, for me, is a great editor of things you're working on to clean up structure, redundancies, and things like that, for sure.
Yeah, I think the boss.
Yeah, no, and we're, it's trying to, teaching people AI. It's kind of funny. You get, a lot of different ends of the spectrum of how to use it, right? Of like, very either anti-AI or, oh, AI is the best thing ever. But like you're saying, it's the making it you work for you in the small ways, not the, hey, create me an article about the, Iran or the Indian, Pakistan, whatever. Well,
Yeah.
because it's gonna, you're gonna get some funny results sometimes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not an easy button. And I've seen people try that, and like, it will spit out stupid sometimes. I mean,
Yeah. Hey, so John, you mentioned research, and I'm continuing this topic because I think what really drives me to write sometime, me personally, is I love doing research. I'm kind of a dork like that. But I know Mariah and you probably have some commonality in this, is that you're doing, like, when I do research, I'm reading books and I'm like quoting authors like John Spencer, I'll be quoting, but you guys are like, the research that you guys are doing, like, it's like ground level research. Like you are the person that's collecting the data. You in essence are my content when I go to research. Can you share a little bit about some of the stuff that you do when you're actually on the ground and you're surveying that battlefield site and you're like, hey, these are the things I'm looking for. This is what I'm looking for when I'm trying to do that case study that you talked about from Azerbaijan.
Yeah, no, it's again, I love my job. At West Point, I learned about, we had to do a lot of staff rides like
Hmm.
Gettysburg, Antietam, Saratoga. A staff ride is always going to be better than a battlefield tour when you just listen to a historian who wants you to love history as much as he does, right? And I make fun of historians, although I do a lot of historical work. Um, but that staff ride really influenced what we started doing, which were contemporary battlefield assessments, studying wars. And then really with the Ukraine, well, before that, the Mumbai attacks 2008, we went to India, where I started mixing my research capabilities with both quantitative and qualitative ability. And then, okay, studying the past, studying storytelling, the
Hmm.
case studies really became a way to tell a story of a battle that hasn't been written about. So I think one of the terminologies that's used for what I do is ethnographic research.
Okay.
So I'm interviewing first person, right? So that's always, if you're a historian, that's what you want. You want first person works and, in the archives, all this stuff. As for me studying modern wars, I'm going and collecting those. So I'm doing all the interviews with any commander, or really it starts with trying to find out what the key moments are, right? And if you do Gettysburg like we all have, you're going to where we have now determined are the key moments, right? Whether
Hmm.
it's Pickett's charge or Devil's Den, all these things. So I'm trying to and I do a lot of pre-trip research to identify what were the key moments that a decision was made or an event happened that determined the overall trajectory of the battle. So I target my research based on that. Like, okay, whenever I go, like I want to go to these places, I want to talk to these unit commanders. I'll do the high level stuff if they want me to, but I'm trying to create a story of what happened because that's how we learn. And the Battle of Kiev was probably one of the biggest projects we did, and it took 4 trips into Ukraine. The first couple trips were just trying to find out where were the key moments, then doing all the quantitative research you can to try to figure out the numbers, but the qualitative as well, where a human made a decision that determined something, a commander or a civilian or something like that, and weave in what the narrative of human storytelling that's a part of it. So it's fascinating. It's a passion. It's really hard work though, to even do the pre-work of a unique style of modern war research, because it's really hard to get overcome by, wars are massive. I narrow it down. Of course, I'm an urban guy, so I have the ability to go like, look, I know a lot's happening over there, but I need to study this battle and what happened in this case.
Yeah, that's excellent. Hey, Sam, you have multi-domain warfare on your mind,
Okay.
right? You got some threads you can pull on that, buddy?
Yeah, I think, and what I'd like to do is kind of tie that to the urban warfare piece, because I think about that a lot with the conflicts we have going in right now. I'm looking to do a piece about information warfare, regarding Gaza and Russia as well, and this is a constantly evolving information environment, and I'm interested to see, um, what you would be interested to read about when it comes to how information, to include writing that we do in the military, um, is affecting the current operational environment, and how that discourse can drive change and better prepare us for these dynamic threats that we're seeing across the globe.
Sure. I mean, I of course have done a lot of work on that through the research, but also through the study and teaching warfare at West Point about how much that information operations, information warfare can impact all the operations. I would personally like to read something that traces kind of the effect, right? We called it the Cronkite effect in Vietnam when Walter Cronkite came back, and the U.S. president said, well, if we've lost Cronkite, then we've lost the war. And it was the point where the strategic, basically war was lost because you've lost the information aspect. Later, that was called the CNN effect. Later, it was called the TikTok wars. Now, in the if you can use a case study approach of here are these events that are clearly well-established moments. In the first Battle of Fallujah, for me, urban warfare again, great. Another moment, the information domain, the information fight being lost, causing war or battles to be lost. Translate that into Gaza, there are key moments where it has impacted not the court of public opinion, but actual political decisions, right? So in Gaza, because of the loss of the narrative and what's going on, the U.S. stance on the correct number of civilian casualties are zero. Do not go to Rafah. You could very quickly draw a quick thread of how important the information operations can go for both winning and losing in war, and whether we resource it enough. I don't like reading big pieces personally. I'm usually around a 2,500 word person, and I'm losing interest personally, unless I'm looking for a segment like a RAND report, a segment of a report. So I think you could draw that thread within that information operations lens and show direct cases where even the United States lost that battle for many reasons.
Yeah, thanks. And I think that's a good, I guess, transition to another thought I had about folks that are at that tactical level. I think when we see a lot of the thought leaders, we're seeing a lot of senior leaders. When I'm reading stuff on the different, MWI or War on the Rocks, it's generally field grades and above, and junior officers and NCOs may not feel that they have a voice. But as you just alluded to, right, some of those big level issues when we talk about things like AI, IO, UAS, whatever, they affect folks that are at that ground level, and they should have a voice and not just think that it's folks that have spent time at Carlisle Barracks or whatever making that. Do you have any advice for how those squad leaders, team leaders, platoon leaders can start to find their voice and share it?
Yeah, again, it goes back to, I grew up, I was a private to sergeant first class, and writing or thinking about sharing wasn't a part of a priority set by the institution. And I know they're trying to change that. Convincing pieces or convincing communication to them that their level have impacted wars, both positively and negatively, whether it's, the hedgerow bunker buster, the hedgerow busters of World War II, and that's a sergeant, or the Abu Ghraib, or, the burning of the Quran, these events at that lower enlisted level that have strategic impact. We call it the strategic corporal back in the day. I don't know what it's called now. Translating to them that their awareness, but also their actions absolutely have strategic impact. So even in Gaza, the great kind of mistake there was the discipline about Facebook of iPhones, right? So you have junior enlisted people doing the wrong thing, videotaping stuff, and that gets turned into a 30-second clip that impacts global opinions of a war. Understanding and that they have that impact and have a say in the shaping of the future, I think would be important. It's tough to do at their level, though, to convince them that it's a priority for sure.
Yeah. I have another question, but anyone else before I fire off, and I don't want to dominate.
I just thought I'd ask a couple questions. Well, when you talk about your research and being on the ground, and really, you said ethnographic, and I think like from the qualitative standpoint, getting that information from the people on the ground, because it's their lived experience, right? So it has meaning to them, and then being able to turn that into something that people want to read, to your point, is information piece. Because I would imagine there's something going on the other side of pick a war and pick who you were interviewing, like in the Battle of Kiev, right? There's probably people on the other side of the spectrum that are countering what you're saying, because they're getting the life experience and meaning of the opposing forces. But I think it's neat that you take the qualitative and then just do a mixed method there at the end, is to have the quantifiable data support the qualitative piece. It's pretty interesting.
Absolutely. And then the lessons learned. So each one of my reports has a lesson learned that is focused on the U.S. military. So that's always been the so what as well. And writing that is, what can we take from, whether it's just a human story or actual, like even those lower level decisions, absolutely mixing the qualitative and the quantitative. People say, and it's really hard to get both sides, right? And that's why historians are always hesitant to publish on modern things, because they want all sides. They want first person. And this is why we stood up the Modern War Institute, because there was a lack of this. Like, no, like there's lessons being learned that aren't being learned, whether that's fielding of equipment, individual pieces of equipment that are failing or having great success. I mean, you have legacy systems being very impactful in modern wars today. And then you have, a combination, which is my stick, is that all warfare is a mix of the old and the new. Even my own combat experiences of having a lot of old and needing some new, but using it creatively, but that lesson not being then spread across the force. I have a new piece coming out about the IDF learning officers that they created. Very interesting. I don't know if we could do it, to be able to capture some of that stuff while you're fighting. But thanks for that on the research. It's not easy, actually, and it's there's some reasons why even our greater DoD can't do the thing I do, which is go into an active combat zone and interview people without politics involved, without country clearances and all these things. So I'm not rogue, but I know where the boundaries are.
Yeah. Hey, John, you were talking about social media, and and you talked about some of the discipline of Facebook brought down some of the things in Gaza. And I know one of the challenges that you champion is this whole idea of stats, of body counts and the Israeli Gaza war. And so when you see an article that comes online and they report something, and you see that it's wrong, or you opine that you have a different understanding of the facts belayed. So some of our writers have a challenge, some of our writers deal with this challenge of, how do I go about contesting an idea and do it in a professional manner, so that people can see that, okay, I don't like this guy's idea for XYZ. These are the reasons why he's lacking ABC. How do you kind of prepare for that? Because you kind of like you mentioned, you kind of put yourself out there, and historians don't like to do that. But I think some of that interests our soldiers. I mean, I look at our soldiers, I look at the generation of young kids out there, and they are absolutely challenging current thought. And they like this idea of challenging. And so how do we prepare them? How can they best prepare to maybe take on an idea, an institutional idea, maybe a doctrinal idea, and say, I challenge that, and here's why? Do you have a good approach for that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a method for it. Again, you never attack a person, you attack the veracity of the positions, right? So you can look back at my pieces. There's a couple I did. One guy said you couldn't do maneuver warfare in urban areas, or that there's a couple pieces where I push back against a position. Now it's like I see through the matrix, because I got thrust onto this national stage. When I can see, like a New York Times article feature, millions of man hours, and then I can see through the matrix and say, like, look, but this is the giant gap in a logical chain that you just did. So a lie by omission. So I've progressed through, but so here's and I wrote about this in the Why I Write, because if I see something that I believe is wrong, it's like a rock in my shoe that I can't get out until I pull the thread. And sometimes I pull the thread and like, okay, I didn't know enough about that topic. Even like the history of enter and clear a room. It wasn't until I pulled that thread, like, where did it come from, to the point where it's become dogma and it's the answer to everything. If somebody has an idea that they see, like I disagree with that position, whether it's, throwing the ball over your head or whatever, you got to do the due diligence. If there's a person or an institution pushing something that is wrong, then you attack the claim, right? And then, so there are absolutely what we kind of professional standards for doing it. And you've seen me argue with in debates now with like comedians and things like that. And I'm still learning as well, but in writing is pretty straightforward. You start with the opening paragraph this is the position, or this is the person said this, and then you leave it at that. And then you just attack by demonstrating either the data or the history or the logical train, right? So there's often lies by omission, or just a lack of, like, you disconnected. Well, right now I deal with a lot of people doing revisionist history, right? So they have an actual event that happened, but then they try to tell a convincing story by leaping forward a few years, whether that's, like the Budapest Agreement or other things in Ukraine, but they'll jump forward years in advance. They're all special tools you use to push back against ideals. So you just have to do the research once you've identified it. And if it's legitimate, editors will really look for that. Like, no, that's great, whatever it is, but you got to you can't just have opinions. Like I say now, like, you can have an opinion, of course. Is it an informed opinion? Right. And it could be something that like a lower enlisted, like I've done this every day of my life for 20 years. And no matter how much Motrin I take, it doesn't help me. There is some experiential knowledge that you can use that is very credible. And actually, this is one of the first lessons I learned when I had a civilian professor telling me, like, look, you have a lot of lived experience that the greater world would love to hear about, whether that's, the IED fights or whatever. So there's absolutely ways to do it.
Yeah,
Do
very
you have
good.
any mechanisms you use to defeat your own biases when you're doing this stuff like that? Because I know sometimes when I come at a project, I have a thought for what I want it to be, and I'm always worried, like, am I gonna commit sins of omission just by the way I'm doing research? What ways do you, when you're looking at a battle or whatever the topic is, do you say, like, how do I make sure that I'm capturing all the viewpoints and not just guiding my own narrative?
Absolutely. So that's the external reviewer. So I have a trusted group, and I've built this trusted group for years. A lot of them are regional experts. Some of them are technical experts, like a drone expert. So if I have something I'm right about and I don't feel like, if it's urban warfare related, I'm pretty confident in the research I've done over a decade. If it's domain specific, then I look for other SMEs. And that's why my podcast is just my own research open air, right? So I'm inviting people who have more knowledge in a topic than I do. I'm learning, and then I'm helping other people understand. I rarely publish something, although I've kind of gotten there lately, but without somebody reviewing it for substance and for content. Or content and structure, right? So the logic train, but also the experts. So like for Ukraine, I had a Russian military expert, Michael Kaufman, that I wouldn't write something about Russian military unless it went through him and going, give me a quality check. And so if you build this network, I also often would write in day-to-day communication, kind of office talk. A lot of people didn't know that I was doing that. So if I had an ideal, I would talk to my buddies around me, like, what do you think about this? And they'll push back a little bit. And it was a really big when I was at West Point. I'm writing using them just in a water cooler talk which is a part of it as well. But the external reviewer is so important to finding those holes. And maybe you need to go back and research something a little bit more. Or I have a couple of people that are just smarter than me. So they're, whether it's your strategy or international relations, that's been the beauty of my path as well, as to build this network of people who are friends, but also experts.
Yeah. Hey, that's interesting, John. I mean, have you ever found that you've gone on site to do one of these battlefield assessments, and you came back and you talked to your buddy that's a SME, and you're like, "Hey, I know you keep talking about XYZ, but I was just there, and guess what, brother? It's actually 1, 2, 3." I mean, have you come across a situation like that? And how do you bring them into the fold? Like, now actually you're peeling back a layer for them.
Um, in the Ukraine war, it was kind of back and forth with other people like Michael Kaufman or Rob Lee or a bunch of people that were experts in viewing the same, even the Battle of Kiev. I would meet with people that were researching that as well. The Nagorno-Karabakh war was interesting because the entire world and a couple of really awesome writers like John Antal and all this were taking all the open source information about the how lethal the drones were in 2020 during that war. I went there and walked the ground and then discovered things that were kind of being missed, as in like there's only one road in this entire area, much of it going through the open area. So I could see why a drone's really impactful. There's nowhere to see cover and
Yeah.
concealment. So that kind of makes sense. You're fighting in a bowling alley. If you think about that, like, no, but
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
have been those. That was a really big moment for me, and which really was a motivation to keep. And now that's one of my big research projects right now, is to go back to, we're actually going back because so much was. This is what I've learned as well about writing, where we used to say history's right. The victors write the history, right? That's what they
Yeah.
say. And there is some of that, right? If you go back and start digging into my work, even the urban legends of urban warfare, we'll create an institutional belief of what happened somewhere. And right now for everybody in the world, it's like the Iraq War. Like, this is why we did it, and this is how we lost it. Like, okay, like there's some nuances there that you're missing. But the victor writes to history, but it's also the writer that writes to history. I've had people push back. So like right now, I've been writing, in the Battle of Manila, all records show that 100,000 civilians died after that battle. Now, there's one historian that reached out to me going, look, I know where that number comes from, but it's actually not that number. So you have to be open to that level of input as well. So I've received it on both ends. Yes, absolutely. There's also kind of like, this is the creative process of, what am I going to say? What caveats will I put on top of it also as well?
Mhm.
Like the agreed upon, when you start to get into numbers, again, like you said, I've been pushing back on numbers, is I search for numbers because people want numbers, but also understanding the inaccuracy of any number that you're going to put, and then whose credibility to use to say, like, we kind of gotten to this point of shared agreement on a number or something like that.
Wow. Yeah. That's cool. Hey, anyone else? I got a couple more questions for John, but I know I do a lot of talking on this show, so I try to make myself as small as possible. What do you got out there, team?
I
Okay.
think I got one more.
All right, Sam.
So hey, just you're the urban warfare guy, but I know you have a lot of other experience across your military career. How did you kind of become the urban warfare guy, right? Like I hear about like Ryan Holiday when he talks about making the main thing your main thing, and as we try to kind of hone our research places, how did you decide to do that? From everything else you've done, and what did you do to further yourself in that field?
Sure. So it's a great writing story, actually. So I was a part of the chief of staff of the Army/OSD internship, right? Where you go to Georgetown for a year, get a master's, which was hard. as somebody who had kind of done away with education once I joined. You do a year at Georgetown, then you do a year on the Joint Staff or the OSD staff, and then you do a year on the Army staff. All that was really important in my development. But I had a year gap from joining my wife at the time to go to West Point. So I competed for the Chief of Staff of the Army Strategic Studies Group, which doesn't exist anymore. It was a great program where it's just 20 actual lower level officers, senior officers, and then 20 or 10 civilians. But it was a research think tank year. And that year we looked at megacities as kind of the theme of all of our research, whether it was equipment, force design, force structure, you name it, doctrine, for a full year doing research on megacities and what could the U.S. Army specifically operate in them. That started the urban thread. I moved to West Point, though, and I was just teaching tactics, and then I was teaching introduction to strategy, created the Modern War Institute, and we wanted to start producing something. So I wrote one article, which I could have wrote as Armed Forces class easily. And it was just an information piece on how we use concrete walls in Iraq. Every day in Iraq, I was involved in putting up concrete walls for many reasons, Jersey barriers, whatever. I wrote this one article. I called it like the most effective weapon on the battlefield is concrete. And it took a little bit of research to do it, but not much. And that article went viral. National Geographic Education picked it up. Every news organization, for some reason, the entire American society didn't know that for whatever 6 years, we were laying concrete every day, making safe neighborhoods, securing our lines of communications to help defeat they didn't have a clue. And that put the bug in as in, wait a minute, there's something here within the urban. I started writing more pieces about urban specific pieces. And because of that year with the General De Niro, I knew that there was no office, no organization, no leader. So it was like I had already identified the gap, but it wasn't until I started writing on it that I saw the supply and demand, and that began a day-to-day process of researching, learning, narrowing down. You had to know the history of. Then I started doing the interviews of people. Even my own battle, I was in the Battle of Sadr City in 2008. Understanding once I started interviewing the commanders, that I had very little awareness of what was going on at the different levels of that battle, all put the bug into me. And then I eventually became, just by sheer scholarship, right? Writing, researching, publishing, podcasting, that I started to be able to get to a point where I could see through the matrix of, look, I know what you're doing. I know why you're doing it. I know that became immensely like a professional self-actualization, right? Once you hit that level of, man, this is so amazing that I fell into something that nobody's covering.
Yeah, that's cool. Good question, Sam, and excellent answer, John. It's crazy how something can go viral. People just take up like something that you're doing because you had a passion about it, or you thought there was a need, and people latched onto it. That's amazing. Hey, so John, I don't know, a little bit earlier in the segment, you talked about co-authors, and so you say you have to have sometimes you have good co-authors, sometimes you have bad co-authors. I guess my question about co-authorship is how do you mingle the two styles, or how do you make sure one voice doesn't drown out the other, or do you try to aim to get like a singular voice, or do you try to do like this counterpunctual routine where you're going to have two voices and people can absolutely see that there's multiple authors? I mean, what's your take on that?
METTC. No, it really matters. So you learn. So if it's somebody you never co-authored before, I've done projects where you literally sketch out something that you're going, whether a report or an article, and say, look, you have that part, you have this part, you have that part. Everybody submits their part, and then one person takes the lead of melding it all. Mm-hmm. That's more lengthy. Now I do a lot of co-authoring where one or the other person takes the lead on it in general.
Mm-hmm.
and writes a big, like 75% of it. And then the other person comes in based on their expertise and makes a big change, adds a little bit here or there. It really depends on what the topic is, the length of it, and then what's the relationship between you and your co-author. If it's new, where I've found the most difficulty is somebody who's never written much or who hasn't done any co-authoring and is unsure of their role in the process. You establish it up front. If you build a relationship with the co-author, then it just flows like magic of somebody's got an ideal, then they sketched out a big portion of it, send it to you, recognizing it's not a final anything, which is kind of the humbleness between the two co-authors. Like, look, this is where I'm at. I have a gap, or just what do you think about this? The context really matters. But if you both have a conversation and a shared ideal, then you can split up the work on it and then set the deadlines, which I think is the benefit of the co-authors is one person might be more motivated than you or the other way around to get it done. And then you agree on a timeline like, hey, this is what I'm doing. But also outlet really matters. And we haven't talked about that yet. Like, why are you writing it? And then where do you want to put it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're into blogging, I'm not, although I've joined Substack recently, but I still think there's much value in publishing in an outlet where you're going to reach the most amount of people. Army Times, Military Times, if you're going to go mass media, things like that. Each one of those, though, if you decide above, even if you have just 3, like I want to write for Military Review, NCO Journal, then you have to assess what do they publish and the format they use, which guides your co-authoring strategy.
Yeah. No, that's excellent. Well, hey, look, we got about 2 minutes left. I just want to reach out to the round table here. Did I get everything you guys we talked about in advance of this? Are we covered? What do you got? What did I miss?
I think you covered it all. I mean, I appreciate the insight of understanding how you can grab both qualitative and quantitative data in order to reinforce your pieces.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because as people write on the opposite side, they also have like an opposite but similar correlation of meaning, but also numbers. So and that's how we get better as humans, is understanding how a person lived in the moment.
Yeah.
What I always say, what a good mentor of mine told me was, in God I trust, all others bring data.
That's true. I like that. Very good. Yeah. So, hey, just to recap, John, thanks for being here. I know we got some major points to take away for our audience. First of all, when you're searching something and you plan on challenging an institutional idea, do your diligence, attack the claim, state your position, and put in a lot of data, history, and have a good logical train for it. In terms of like if you're shopping the idea of co-authorship with a friend or a colleague, it's good to someone take lead, someone take backup. Somebody's got someone's on drums, someone's on guitar, right? So you make a good melody. But overall, we appreciate your time. We know you're a busy man, and so this is a wrap. Any parting words for us, John, or you just want me to close it out?
No, I really think this is an amazing project and an initiative. And what I say is the only way to do it is to get started. You do it one word at a time, one paragraph at a time. And it seems like it's hard, but the more you actually commit to it, the easier it becomes, and it just flows.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you for everyone out there for joining us. Chief, what do we got next on, and when's the next time we're meeting? I think we're taking a summer break, aren't we?
We are, sir. AT season, right? Everything else is going on. I think.
Yeah.
Touching base with the Mad Major Cox this morning. We're looking at August 14th, possibly for the next session, episode 10.
Yeah.
So, little bit of a hiatus, but we'll get everybody back together.
Yeah, I think we're having Mick Ryan come on in one of those dates in August, so it'll be good. So appreciate, John. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate your time. That's it, folks. That's a wrap. So we'll put a bow on it, and y'all have a great day. Adios.
Thanks, sir.
Have a good one. Thank you.
Bye.